So, the broadcast is started. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all viewers from all around the world. This is Frank van den Driest, one of the Institute for Real Growth founders, and I welcome you to the Humanized Growth Series. This webinar is organized by the Institute for Real Growth, simply IRG. And for more information about us and our work, please visit instituteforrealgrowth.com. Just to say that at IRG, it's our purpose to help CMOs and other growth leaders humanize business growth by connecting them to thought leadership, experts, and peers. This webinar intends to do exactly that. We call this the Humanized Growth Series because we believe that real growth is about long-term value creation for all humans. It is not about focusing on the short term only to create value and drive and create as much money for our shareholders only, but about long-term value creation for all stakeholders. Last week, my co-founder, Mark de Swans-Arons, talked with Greg Welch from Spencer Stuart about the role of the CMO in driving humanized growth. Today, I'm honored to have with me a leader with an incredible track record of delivering growth, Patrick Zhu. After having worked for the likes of Procter & Gamble, Mondelez, and Danone, Patrick is now the CEO of China's largest communication, experience, commerce, and technology services provider, WPP. In the next hour, Patrick and I will talk about what the world can learn from China. So, with that, welcome, Patrick. First of all, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you, Frank. Very happy, to be here. Thank you. Have this opportunity, to speak, with you and, to meet all the participants here, all the audience here. Thank you, Frank.
Great. That's good to hear. Just one thing, just so you know, Greg Welch last week talked about the need that we should pay more attention to how you look on Zoom, and that very senior leaders present themselves very poorly on these video conferences. So I went to the store yesterday and to buy a tripod. We learned from influencers that the camera should be positioned higher than our face, and connected my iPhone camera to the Zoom session. But now, of course, I will never look as pretty as Greg Welch, that's clear. But even though my background and everything looked super sharp and very clear, my own face looked like deep red and my skin really weird and way too shiny. So unfortunately, I'm back to my integrated laptop camera, so apologies for that. But on a more serious note, Patrick, for quite some time, business leaders in the West have seen China as a follower. That's changed quite dramatically in a number of ways. We go to China to learn about e-commerce, agility, and speed in business, just to name a few. And now China is very much at the forefront of dealing with C-19. Yeah. So China has shifted from a follower to a leader. Two questions for you. How have you experienced that shift? And what do you see as the biggest misconceptions that people outside China might have about business in China?
All right. I'm live and breathe, this, sort of, a shift, or, massive change. Let me use my example, myself as an example, right? When I first graduated from university, in Shanghai and got, a management trainee role with Procter. Procter, gave me a monthly paycheck of $60 US dollar for a month. That was that was 3 times. I remember very clearly. That was 3 times more than my dad was earning at that time. Right? My dad looked at me and said that, you just graduated from university and you know nothing. right? You're earning 3 times more than I do, right? Now, obviously, after like a 30 years, China has been changing so quick and so dramatically, right? Um, Now, I think, from a consumption habit standpoint, China is not just sort of evolved slowly, but it's actually, changing, evolving dramatically, and then in a leap forward manner, I think, so we often talk about that, we don't have a landline telephone systems all of a sudden that we leap forward, to the mobile phone systems, completely into mobile. We don't have very good, sort of, so-called, supermarkets and hypermarkets, those, so-called modern trade, but very, very quickly, moving to e-commerce, right? That's sort of the, change and leap forward, China experiences, and all the 1.4 billion populations here in China experienced. I think one thing that, if you ask me that, what are the big, sort of a misperception of, the people outside of China will look at China, the biggest misperception, I would say that, if especially compared to Europe, right? China is very much distinguished by its diversification and differentiation in various market levels. China is you cannot look at China as a one market, right? It's very, very diversified. It is multiple different consumer groups and multiple different consumer circles, and with big geographic differences. You almost need to look at China market as a continent. Consists of many, many different differences. That would be my answer to your question.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I totally recognize what you're saying, by the way. So when we announced this session, we talked about lessons learned from China post-COVID-19. Obviously, we're not post-COVID-19. China is not. However, as said earlier, we're definitely ahead of the curve. So let's talk about some lessons that we can learn from China in dealing with C-19.
Yeah.
What are the most important shifts that you see happening, and what do you feel that means for marketing and other business and growth leaders?
I think there's a lot of change. There's a lot of shift. In this COVID-19. But I think what we want to really focus is the marketing and communication related, right? I think a couple of things that struck me the most is that the marketers really need to focusing on cost-effective, innovative ways to drive demand, right? I think that's one thing that very, very important. So one example that I can quote is this real estate property company that in China called Evergrande, a big Chinese property firms. During the COVID-19 outbreak, encouraged its sales force to use social media, virtual reality technology to promote homes, during the completely lockdown of the entire country, right? Sales more than doubled in February, right? To almost like 6.4 billions. I think that's an example that you have to be much more nimble, and the thing that I think that I always said to many of my clients and many of my colleagues is that in China that you need to test and experiment. You cannot making sure you cannot making sure that everything is certain. You cannot making sure that after you've done tons of analysis and be really certain that this is the winning recipe, and then starting doing things. Often in China we say that you touch the stone and you cross the river, right? That's the way, that's the spirit I think you got it to do, right?
Yeah, and I think that's even pre C-19. in my mind and in my travel to China over the past 20 years, speed is something that really, speed and action orientation is what really stood out for me every time I visited China.
Yeah.
Also, Patrick, so I know that, for example, Wuhan and other places, stores are opening back up, consumers are getting out in the streets again.
Yeah.
However, they're also quite hesitant and careful and not per se willing to go back to the spend level before C-19. So I guess that needs some encouragement from big companies to get consumers back into the market and back into buying modus. Do you see any of that? Is there any examples that you come to mind on this point?
Well, I think we see lots of example, right? So one of the example that I can give it to you is this big e-commerce giant e-commerce platform JD.com, right?
Yeah.
They allocated 1.5 billion RMB worth of marketing resources to help merchants and brands who are heavily impacted by the epidemic to bring more quality goods into nationwide consumers. They do key promotion events, they do live stream, they're providing coupons, flash sales, plus memberships and content marketing to support their merchants. So, you're absolutely right. You have to encourage the consumers, to back into the market. There is a reluctancy, in the consumers, especially at the later part of the COVID-19 sort of crisis. You have to encourage them, to coming back to the marketplaces. Yeah. And another thing that I also wanted to say, while you encourage that, you also need to be ready to sacrifice for a short-term period of times, your margins, right? And you accept lower margin in the short term. I think that's something marketers and the businesses need to be prepared. So I give example like in Wuhan, that we know that lots of restaurants are impacted very, very negatively during this outbreak. And now that the city is open up, the restaurant is opened as well, their services, but the traffic, the business is still in the slow sort of start. So lots of the restaurant are starting to willing to deliver their deliver catering services to the entire city of Wuhan, which inevitably means that it will be higher cost to them. It will be that a lower margin for them, but I think that's the way to go, and making sure the consumers are back into the market and back to their businesses.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned this. Actually, less than an hour ago on LinkedIn, I saw a post by your Kantar colleague that's in the WPP building, Thomas Pichot, and he wrote a little piece about how many famous big restaurants in Shanghai are closing doors. Hakkasan and just are not surviving the business, but that there's some examples that actually do open doors and grow. But what they do is actually they make the restaurant multi-purpose. So some shopping, some snacks and simple eating, obviously recognizing and creating a lot of space. So you see a lot of, let's say, new ways of engaging, and especially in the hospitality business.
Exactly.
Yeah, go ahead.
I can give you an example of such, right? We at WPP, we serve one of the biggest fast food restaurant, Yum Group, yeah. Right? Yeah. I think what I was having a conversation was their CEO here in China, Joe Yuhua. Obviously they got impacted very, very significantly in the months of Feb, in the months of March, because of the lockdown and stuff, right? and they still need to, paying their employees, right? Now, one thing that, they come up with a very good idea, and the whole WPP, we supported them, which is after, the office come back to normal operation, right? Lots of the businesses are actually having issue in terms of their lunch solutions for their employee, right? Because, your restaurants, the surrounding restaurants are still not yet completely open, right? And then you wanted to have social distancing, continue to follow during this period of times. So how do you deal with lunch, for your employee? So what Yum provided is provided a group delivery lunch solution for WPP campus. We have like a 3,500 people in this, WPP campus in Shanghai. And, in the morning, they come in, with an app, and then we put the order in it. And then in the noontime, they have one delivery. So, they don't need to send like hundreds of people to deliver the food to us. They just, have one delivered to us. And then it reduces, obviously infections, sort of chances, but also that, deliver, the food and, support us, during this, critical time, but also for them, it's a great business opportunity for them, right? So that's an example. I think lots of smart business person, marketers starting to find new opportunity to grow their businesses even in the difficult time.
Yeah, great example, and good to hear. And obviously, I know you told me that that you've returned, going back to the offices and being able to work from the offices.
Yeah.
Just to come back on lessons learned from China, there's one other topic that I think even pre-C19, the rest of the world would be, or my estimate would be, 3 to 4 years behind on China when it comes to focus on digital channels and especially e-commerce. And I know you told me earlier this week that the biggest shift you saw was in China, the increase and the acceleration of e-commerce and online digital commerce across the board, across categories. And that is, again, looking from a Western perspective, where you were already ahead. So, so there's quite a lot for us to be expected in this space. Can you tell a little bit more about the forefront there in China?
Yeah, I think as a marketers, and I think whether you're in China or whether you're outside China, I think focusing the digital channels and e-commerce, I think it is so important. I cannot emphasize more. I think some sort of phenomenon that I observe. I think companies are now experimenting with new distribution channels, right? With worker scarce and customer happier to get a delivery from a machine rather than the humans these days. I think automated delivery has been embraced, by the Chinese e-commerce, giants such like Alibaba and JD and Meituan. I saw this report from this guy called Edward Xie from Gaofeng consulting firm. And he believed that the autonomous delivery will be widespread within 12 to 18 months, much faster than he previously thought possible, right? I think that's an interesting piece that this COVID thing will push e-commerce, even more, right? Another example, I can share with you is, our client Nike. They experiences huge growth worldwide, global level, right? On the channel sales, right? Now, specifically during this COVID, period in China, the Feb months and the March months, they experiences almost more than double their businesses on e-commerce channels, during those period of times. And one of the things that they also do, I think from a marketing communication standpoint very, very well is that, on their apps, they're leveraging social media, continue to using celebrity or key influencers, to encourage people while the lockdown in their apartments to continue to, doing exercise, keep fit, and then this also help, their businesses, during this lockdown, right? I think, leveraging social, leveraging key influencers, and then connect all those together with the channel made a huge success for Nike here in China during the COVID break.
Yeah, I actually saw on an internal channel of WPP, what's his name? Neil Stewart, I believe. He is the head of Wunderman Thompson's e-commerce business.
Yeah.
How indeed e-commerce, whether it's marketplaces, whether it's direct to consumer, whether it's social commerce, on all of these aspects, we see significant growth. Also in the West, and much more to come. That's very clear also from your comment.
Yep.
Patrick, this series, as I said in the beginning, is called the Humanizing Growth Series. It's related to the definition of growth, as I said, long-term value creation for all people, for all human beings, colleagues, customers, the communities that we operate in, but also the capital markets. In the West, this has been very hot the last few years. Recently, the US Business Roundtable, although they didn't use the term exactly real growth, they've almost used exactly the same definition in their restatement of the purpose of the corporation in the US. Also in Davos early this year, many world and business leaders have really embraced this concept. A significant shift from the good old Friedman days when the focus was for 100% on making as much money for your shareholders as quickly as possible. Now, two questions for you on this concept of real growth. To what extent do you feel that this concept is really on the agenda in China? And secondly, what can we learn from China? Because we know China to be very action-oriented in the move away from, in the move to actually implement it. So first, what's the situation, and then what action do you see?
Yeah, I think I think it's I think it's moving quite rapidly, I should say. I think China still has a long journey to go, in those areas. But there are specifically, I think, two areas that I wanted to sort of mentioning. One is, I think people, Chinese people, there's a clear consensus. People need to have access to clean water, clean air, safe neighborhood. In order to have a healthy environment, people need to enjoy their lives, while that, enjoy the economic prosperity at the same time. I think that's a very well sort of accepted consensus, so it's good, we see, the businesses, the authority and the community starting to working on this. I think this is a part of the sustainable development, the sustainable growth, efforts, I see, that's one area. I think that there's another area that I also see is the whole campaign of combating poverty in China, right? China is still, it's a 1.4 billion population, country, right? It's not all the areas, all the geography is like Shanghai. Some people come to Shanghai and think, hey, Shanghai is a very well developed, cities, obviously. But if you're going to deep into the West, if you go down to the prefectures, go down to the rural side, you still see a lot of poor people. People live in, poverty. I think what the authority and what the businesses and the community join hands to working in terms of combating the poverty. I think that's a big campaign. and businesses obviously have a role to do. So, for instance, promoting, internet, sort of cars, making sure that the low class incomes, be able to get better job opportunities, and create more jobs. One of the example that I was pretty impressed is there's social e-commerce platform Pinduoduo. What they have done is connecting the dots from the farmers in the countryside, in the faraway mountain areas, where traffic, transportation infrastructure is not that good, but they have local producers very well then connected to the urban consumption, so that they actually helping to sell those produce, from the very far away countryside into urban city like Shanghai, and then increase the incomes of the poor farmers and peasants in the countryside. I think businesses definitely have a role to play there, and then I see consumers using their consumption, their money, to vote for those humanized efforts of those platforms, right? It's not just the capital, the business value you create. It's also helping people. I saw lots of those kind of efforts are now being happening in this country, happening in this market, also that are well recognized.
Great. Patrick, just a quick call out to the viewers, and there's hundreds of them. There is a Q&A function. In a couple of minutes, I'll start reading you some of those questions that are being posted. I saw the first ones come in. Before we do that, though, how do you think? What is the impact in this shift away from only focusing on short-term gains and financial returns for shareholders to a more long-term shared value, multi-stakeholder focus?
I think.
Yes, I just want to ask you, what's the specifically for marketers? What do you see as the biggest implications for them?
I think that I think the marketers probably need to be much more open-minded, and having a better bigger pictures in their mind when they're looking at their marketing sort of plans, right? And and the final way to integrate the social and purposeful courses into their marketing plan, if there's a relevance there. I think that would be my suggestion. And I see some of the good examples of such, and the people the communities is clearly held to that sort of change. Frank, let me ask you this, all right? In your part of the world, how's you and your IRG colleagues see the implication of those this sort of humanized sort of growth shift? How do you see that for the marketers?
Well, interestingly, as you know, one of the main activities of the IRG is a leadership program. Every year we have 100 senior CMOs, mostly CMOs, chief marketing officers, and other senior growth leaders in a program in which we apply all the learnings to their business and their personal growth. And I've been in touch with many of them over the past weeks. And so to focus the answer of your question on what's happening now, it's very interesting, because what I see, and that's just a personal observation, is that the very first reaction to COVID was survival. Survival and our own people first. our own colleague first. So people first was the one thing, and how do we survive the business? Then like the second reaction, the second wave, if you will, was more about, so how do we, so first of all, on the business and the shareholders, let's stop paying dividends for now, temporarily. But the shift, there was a shift away from colleagues only to also consumers. So we need to engage with them in different ways, deliver to them in different ways. And then you see some that are ahead of the curve now also think their past survival, past dividends, they start looking at actually post C19 growth scenarios. What are the implications? And the interesting thing, they take then a much more holistic perspective and also think of their role in society at large. So what I see is that leading players have a more holistic, are developing a more holistic perspective on humanized growth, applying, and it's being accelerated by C19. And I think that, by the way, creates a great opportunity for marketing leaders to steer that agenda, to help and drive that agenda in their companies. But Patrick, as I said, we're getting questions in, and one here is from Anne Gitau. I know her. She's actually a participant in our program. She leads marketing for Vivo Energy in Africa. And she says, how did you, Patrick, expect consumers to behave after the lockdown? And how did they actually behave? Were there any gaps, any surprises there?
This is about, during the lockdown, or this is about, after lockdown? Sorry, I didn't get that.
Yeah, so when the lockdown started, when you heard what's happening, when the news, so we knew consumers were going to behave differently, act differently. Now, first is what you expected them to do, and how it actually in reality played out. Was it? I mean, did you predict exactly what would happen, or were there surprises there for you?
Well, I think I should say that for my personal experiences, there are things that we sort of predicted, and there are sort of things that we are not predicted, right? And I should say, I think the first reaction most of the consumers they have is they are nervous and they're confused, and they check their necessity supplies, right? I think we see very, very quickly that people go back to the retail stores, right? In China, first, and even as I said, China, you talk about China sort of moving away, from the offline retail. Because of the Meituans of the world, because the Alibaba and JD of the world, the delivery systems capability is so sort of advanced that so there's a lot of consumers actually moving away from the supermarket and the hypermarket. Using me as an example, in the normal days that I can have like a 3-4 months without going to a supermarket. So I can have all my produce, drinking waters, everything, delivered to my doorsteps, right? But I think during the initial COVID-19, I think the unpredictable sort of change is people go back to the offline retail stores. Very, very initial period of time. A couple of things. One is that because everybody's sort of locked down, the delivery systems immediately got compromised, right? You can place an order on the e-commerce sort of platform, but the delivery takes so long time. So that's a big kind of sort of unpredictable in my view, unpredictable thing, because the infrastructure. I think the overall consumption behavior I think is more or less that what we forecasted. People is going to spend more time in their apartments, People is gonna cooking, do a lot more cooking, instead of going out and dying, and that sort of behaviors, I think, driven, pretty, yeah, I would say, pretty, predictable, right? I think in the later part of the outbreak, things people are still sort of cautious, right? As we talk about this early on, that you open up the market, you open up the entire neighborhoods, but people are still very, very cautious. People, when we open the office, right? We now have WPP campus completely open, right? 3,500 people now working in the office right now. But I remember, almost like 9 weeks ago, when we starting to reopen the office, we have to do a lot of over communication to our employee, telling our employee that the whole place is sanitized. You have temperature check. You only allow the maximum people in the lift and stuff like that. So I think as the marketers, that when people come back to the consumption, that you need to find a way to encourage them, because people are still kind of slow warming up. All right, you need to give them a trigger. You got to encourage them, right? You got to encourage them back into the marketplace. Those are I think I would say 2 or 3 observations from a consumer consumption standpoint.
Yeah, good. So related to this, I have a question from Professor Michael Diamond from New York University. He says, Patrick, I'm interested in your perspective on what long-term, enduring changes to consumer behavior, attitudes, and beliefs you expect come out of this. And Michael is very considerate and immediately says, or at least what sort of trends are you paying close attention to? Because obviously nobody has the real answer to this.
Exactly, nobody has the real answer.
Still, he's interested to hear, as am I, in what you think. What are you paying attention to there?
Interesting that we're comparing this COVID-19 with 17 years ago, the SARS impact onto cities like in Beijing and Hong Kong and Guangzhou. It's pretty clear to me that SARS 17 years ago was a very much like a V-shaped sort of a recovery, right? And this one, given that the nature of the virus, this definitely look like a much like a U shape, at least, because the impact is going to be there, right? The new norm until the vaccine is developed. I think you have to be in the long-term sort of a combating mode, with this virus, right? So even in the SARS period times, I think one thing that back in 2003, and SARS actually is a catalyst for Chinese auto market, right? After SARS, the Chinese auto market sort of taking off, and one of the phenomenon we observe in China is that now that it's coming back, the road congestion in Shanghai, Beijing, Guangzhou is more than pre-COVID. The index is almost like 110, 112, compared to pre-COVID, which means that lots of people are using their own passenger cars, for transportation. At the same time, the subways, the volume of subways is only still at 45%, 50%, various different cities. So people are trying to avoid the public transportation and using their own sort of vehicles. I think there's a lot of sort of a caution that people is going to take. People is going to take pay more attention to health. I would assuming that the insurance, health insurance, health related sector, will continue to have opportunity, right? people are still very, very cautious, given this virus. So early on I talk about the sort of delivery, autonomous delivery. I actually think the guy this guy predicted that the autonomous delivery is going to be within like 12-18 months. I think it's very, very likely, because you probably would enjoy that a machine delivery rather than human delivery at this point in time. So I think those are the things I think will change. Another thing I think is also will change is that I observe senior generation, my parents, right, late 70, very, very seldom e-commerce user, but my dad and my mom learned e-commerce, how to shop on e-commerce during this COVID-19 shutdown. Now they're gonna stay there, right? And so again, for e-commerce, online, offline platform, internet services, I think this will be a catalyst for them to continue to boom, right, in the post COVID-19.
Great. Patrick, I see a question here from somebody I haven't seen or heard from in a very long time, Eleonora Meiga. She says marketers' roles have always been to create needs and desire in consumer minds for categories, and specifically for their own brands. Her question is very close to my own heart as well, because she says, but excessive consumption had been taking a massive toll on humanity and on our planet. C19 is showing people that there's lots of things they can actually do perfectly without. So what do you see as the role of a CMO within companies in advocating for responsible consumption while also driving revenue and higher profits in a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to fix massive problems for humanity, such as climate change? And I think her question comes really close to the notion that we talked about humanized growth, where we're looking at the long-term value creation, not only for our shareholders, but also for our colleagues, for our customers, and definitely also the community and the world that we live in. And balancing that will be the new normal, is what I hope, as much as Eleonora hopes, as I read in here. How do you see that? And do you feel, is China ahead there, or is China a follower when it comes to this notion?
I think this is a very this is an ultimate holy grail the CMO, I would say. We talk about in this COVID sort of 19 challenge, the CMOs are working very closely with the CFOs and talent officers, to a certain extent, to making sure the balance sheet is good, cash flow situation is good, and making sure that you help the business survive. I think that's the first thing. All right. I think moving forward, the CMO's role is really need to going back to its business model, right, and relook at the value chains. This audience talking about, is there any sustainable values that or can you reconstruct your value chain so that you be able to disrupt, right, the best models and the creative values, and in a much more sustainable way. I think oftentimes I see that if you be able to do that, I think it's a being a disruptor is is going to create a huge amount of value from a social community standpoint, but also a big business value as well at the same time.
Yeah.
But this is in my view, this is the holy grail.
Yeah. But this is also the time. I agree that with Eleonora. There's one other question from Olga. Olga is Osminskina Jones. She's also a participant in our. She's the innovation and growth officer at Beam Suntory. She says, Patrick, you've shared a number of examples of what worked and went well post the start of the reopening. Are there any lessons you've learned from what was tried by the companies in an effort to rebuild business, but that did not go well? Anything that stands out in particular?
I should say, I didn't see, in the China context, I didn't see that businesses, have, major missteps, in this COVID-19 thing, right? Probably, they use WPP, as a advisor and consultant, but overall speaking, I see, I think there's during the COVID-19 outbreak, there are, probably 30, 40, or maybe, maximum, to half of, the businesses, the brand owners, they be able to find a social, purposeful message from their brand and from their businesses, and it's relevant, to the COVID-19, right? So to a certain extent, they be able to drive the social, responsible message, together with their brand, together with their products and services, and in this, whole sort of, COVID-19, sort of, combat, which is obviously, very relevant and very good, and very well received. There are also lots of the brand, lots of the businesses, which have not much of the relevance, in terms of, COVID-19. I think, they've been very well that, just keep their head down, right, and protect their employee, making sure they do their part, to combating this COVID-19 thing. Do more, talk less, right, during this whole, outbreak. I think, overall speaking, that, when the company follows that, you find a relevant social cause and higher purposeful cause, and you try to push that content. But if not, you just, do your own things, do more, talk less. I think overall that, I don't see major missteps from the brand in the China market.
Well, I see some in the Dutch market for sure.
Really?
Well, I mean, two things. I see in the global market a lot of, there's this video that went viral of big companies making C19 videos, and it's like they're almost literally the same. Very big brands involved here. But so I'm based in the Netherlands, as you know, and the Netherlands is the headquarters of Booking.com. And Booking.com has been very tough on its partners immediately as a response to C19, where I think they made a profit of $8 billion last year. But now they also asked the government, so they made a plea for a fund that the government made available for businesses that are suffering. And that went down really, really bad. That's such a big money machine is applying for funds that are meant for businesses to survive. I know they might be very well intended and these things are always complicated, but that definitely got them a lot of bad news.
I see, yeah.
Patrick, there's a question from also an old friend, Karen Rivar, who now works at IKEA. And she's very much involved in the, let's say, employer branding and the colleague side of the business. She says, hi, Frank and Patrick, we see the importance of employment in this species-level systems change. You mentioned low-income workers and a need for better job opportunities. Which brands are doing work on that?
It's a challenge, I think it's a challenge, big challenge, for lots of the, industries. And, I remember there's a, I can share one example, it happened in China. There's this, chain restaurant, it's actually quite a, big, chain restaurants, Chinese, noodle chain restaurants, in China, very, very successful businesses. And I think, it's at the end of at the end of Feb, the CEO, the chairman, was interviewing, by the newspapers, and then basically said that we can sustain 2.5 months only, right? We because it's a shutdown. The restaurant is shut down, and then we're still paying our employees, and our cash flow, our cash reserve, can only survive 2.5 months, right? It's we're starting to see that some of the big platforms like Alibaba starting to join forces and helping those restaurant like this one, or a lot of the other restaurants to helping them to find a way for the idle sort of employees to find a job during this critical times, right? Which is they actually open the platforms to let those employees to be seconded to the platforms, either to helping them to do delivery, right, or to do commuting services, right. That helped, right, quite a lot, smaller restaurants, or restaurants like this one, right, prior to its sort of open for normalized operations. We see that happening, right, which I think it's also it's also good, and then I think people praised a lot platform like Alibaba did those kind of stuff which is be able to using their capability and helping small businesses during the difficult period of times. Example like that I think is a good case. Very good case.
Great, good answer. So I have a question from somebody that I know very well. It's actually my co-founder, Mark Deswan's Ahrens. He says, how does marketing in China work together and separately with sales and e-commerce technology? So because with the rise and the accelerated rise of e-commerce, it's clearly that marketing, especially in social commerce, for example, who owns a buy it button on a Pinterest page or something, that marketing, sales, and IT will have to work together much more on a much more consistent basis, much deeper and much more often. You're ahead of the pack, as we said, in China. What do you see? What's happening, and what can the rest of the world learn?
Well, first of all, I don't think it's a separate to the thing, right? And I don't think you have this thing called e-commerce platforms, and it's like a specific you need a specific expertise, and that's sort of isolated from the market that we're pretty familiarized which is brick and mortar markets. I think it's all interconnected, right? The good experiences I see, the good practice I see is that you keep on testing and experiment. I often said to many of my clients that there isn't a written winning model for your particular industry, category, and brand and products, right? Even during different phase of your brands and different phase of your products, that the winning recipe in China is going to be very, very different. And the encourage that we give it to people is that we often working with our clients to put all the outputs on a big massive screens on the screens, and then we put all the inputs on the one side of the screen, all the outputs on the one side of the screens. We look at we dial up and dial down the inputs, and we observe the outputs, right? And then we, through test, through experiment, we find a model, a working model for the businesses. And then we also know that we have to hold it lightly, right? Because within like 3 months or 6 months, things will change very, very quickly, right? So you need to keep on, adapting yourself, in this model. I think another thing is that, with regarding of the e-commerce, I simply look at, the e-commerce, as, this is just part of the market, right? We used to have, the stores, the offline supermarkets and hypermarkets. Now, the e-commerce is they are just, a unbreakable part of the markets. And then you have to know those markets. And the way we do this is that, we often, continue to have youngsters to experience this and to test and experiment. And then they take the learnings and share the learnings, and then, spreading learnings across, the organization, so, the entire organization be able to learn, get onto this journey of learning. Then, those capabilities, those, expertise will spreading across the organization and be able to also adding value, to our businesses. I think that's the way, I'll doing, and, we think, that's the only way to do this.
Right. So Patrick, what we're trying to do in this series, we're inviting quite a few CEOs. Before the summer, there will be Miguel Patricio from Kraft Heinz, the former CEO from Unilever, Bob Pullman. We'll have Mark Reed, the WPP CEO. We really love that CEO perspective, because there's many places where marketers talk to marketers, and you once told me a nice anecdote about a former boss of you at Danone that said, if you want to run a business, 80% or 90% of your time you're dealing with shit. We're very practical. But you're also, and Gannon Jones, again, a participant in our leadership program, asked, as a leader of a large workforce, which as a CEO, 8,000 people in the US, in China you're leading?
8,000 people in WPP, yeah.
Yeah, China only, yeah. So what have been your greatest challenges managing that large workforce throughout the COVID crisis so far? And what are, any tips that you, learnings that you want to share with this group?
I think, the biggest challenge, for WPP is people, right? Is how do we making sure, we be able to attract, retain the best people, so that, they be able to deliver the best value, to our clients, So I think, having a strong people agenda, and during this COVID-19 is obviously, how do we protect our people, right? How do we making sure that, we'll be able to go through, this journeys, with our people together, and it came out, strong. I think, that's, the biggest challenge. That's sort of the only thing keep me awake, right? Yeah. I think at the WPP, what we have done back in, the beginning of the outbreak is, we quickly assemble a crisis, leadership teams, right? And then, we're sharing, informations, because the situation is so fluid, there's so much, information floating around. And then we're making sure that, we get a comprehensive view of, the thing. And then we making sure that we always stay connected with our people, right? There's a, we're in a much easier environment, to stay connected with our people, right? But you have to connect with our people, right? All the times, and sometimes you need to over communicate them. You need to listen to them. We also providing, and this is prior to COVID-19. We also provided, this employee support program. We call it EAP assistant program, or EAP program, and this helps our people, because people are nervous, people are confused, people are under so much stress during this thing, and this programs having the professionals helping our people and to go through this tough journey. I think that those are majority of my time spent is during this COVID-19. I think another thing we touch base on is how do we encourage people to continue to experiment and learn? How do we learn new things? For instance, last year that we we believe that, you know, the social commerce is going to be a big, you know, sort of an opportunity. So, you know, the whole WPP work together and, you know, publish, you know, this white paper of social commerce. And then, you know, we develop, you know, new work streams and new capabilities within WPP in helping our clients, you know, to get onto the social commerce opportunity. So again, you know, those are new skills and new capability. That's the fun part of the job. You know, as I told you, you know, the 20% of the 20% of the fun part of a job, that's the fun part of the job. Yeah.
Great. Well, great, Patrick. I want to close here. I want to thank you first and foremost for it's every time we speak, it's a joy, great, and certainly this time as well. To all the viewers, thank you for listening in and watching this webinar. Let me say that next week, same time, same place, I will be talking to Hans Ploost van Amstel. He's the Chief Financial Officer of Adecco Group. And the Adecco Group is the world's largest temp agency. And I think marketers can benefit a lot from learning more from the CFO, like from yours, Patrick, the CEO perspective. So with that, thank you. Thank everybody and hope to see you next week. And take good care. Have a lovely weekend. Goodbye.
Thank you. Thank you, Frank. Goodbye.